For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Reporter Jana Marx discusses her book titled The Krugersdorp Cult Killings Inside Cecilia Steyn's Reign of Terror. Jana, for the viewers who might not be familiar with the Krugersdorp murders, can you briefly give us some background into that case?
So this story dates back to 2007 when Ria Groenewald met Cecilia Steyn. So Ria headed this ministry called Overcomers Through Christ, and she was a professed Christian, and this ministry focused on helping people, quote unquote, who escaped the occult. So it will be Christians that actually work with people, with former Satanists or whatever. And then she met Cecilia in 2007, and Cecilia told her that she's a born-again Christian, but she was a very high-ranked Satanist, and that she was struggling to break loose from those evil roots. So Ria became a teacher for Cecilia. So Cecilia will learn how to be a Christian, how to break loose from this evil background that she had. And Cecilia would, on a regular basis, fall down, cough up blood, and actually become ill of this so-called evil attacks that she had. And then Ria must rush in and pray for her. So that's where the story started. And at one point, Ria got kind of fed up with the situation. I mean, you can imagine if you are busy with someone like 24/7 and she's always calling you or whatever. Ria has a life, she has to continue do what she does, work with the ministry and so on. Cecilia was taking up all of her time. So she started to put a little bit of distance between her and Cecilia, and then Cecilia got angry. And one thing led to another, and Cecilia started to get back at Ria, but her way of getting back was to actually start killing people around Ria. So that's what I call the revenge murders. That were the first 4 murders were all revenge murders, people that Ria loved or Ria know, and that with the sole purpose for Cecilia to actually get back at Ria.
The event or the story has been widely covered in the media, but what made you decide to write a book about this case?
Sure, I was in court since May 2018, and I think in total there was about 60 court days. We were actually sitting there and listening to evidence, 66 state witnesses. It was a very, very big case. And the idea wasn't to write a book from the beginning, actually. I was sitting in, and while I was listening to all of this and just thinking how absolutely bizarre this is, and gathering information, more information, I just realized that I wish I could actually tell the story, the bigger story, because people followed the court case, but it was bits and pieces. It wasn't, especially if a court date is being postponed, you might forget what happened 2 weeks ago. So it was actually a simultaneous thing that happened. I was thinking about writing the book about this, and then the publisher, Blaupa, came to me and said, but they want a book to be written. I'm like, okay, I'm here, I'm fine, just tell me what to do.
You've also met Cecilia's parents last year. From the conversations you have had with them, how was she brought up, and do they believe that their daughter is the mastermind behind the gruesome killings?
Yeah, I think the very sad thing about this thing is that not only the deceased are the victims. I mean, if you can imagine, the parents of Cecilia will always be the mom or the dad of Cecilia Steyn. They tell me they can't even go to Spar. They need to send people to buy their groceries because people will spit on them. People will call them names. So Cecilia was brought up in a sort of a middle-class family. A dad worked on the mines. Mother was a housewife at that stage. She didn't have many friends, Cecilia herself, but she was a girl with a long ponytail. I mean, if you see her in the media now with that little spikes hair, you can't even imagine her with a ponytail, blonde ponytail. But she played there in the koppies of Western area. And although she didn't have many friends, it sounded like a regular upbringing. I mean, it could have been me or any of my friends that had that typical upbringing. The weird thing, Cecilia, she got involved with shady stuff. She was expelled in grade 9 because of her involvement in rituals or Satanism or occultism. And whether that is true or not is an open question, but she wasn't, she couldn't go back to school after that. Her mom tried to get her back into school, but she couldn't get back. And up until today, her mother just denies that her daughter would be involved in any of these things. Her father is a bit more open-minded. He realized, although he doesn't say it too often, he realizes that there's definitely merit in this. I mean, when I was with them, I followed them down to the cells at court during a lunch break, and the father just told her, you know what, whatever happens here, you will still be my daughter. Whatever you did, you will still stay my daughter. I will still stay your father. So I think it's a very, very difficult thing. A mother that maybe doesn't want to know what her daughter did, and a dad that's struggling to get to terms with that facts and still supporting her.
And the members of Cecilia's cult, they ranged from a teacher, a financial broker, to a teenager on her way to medical school. How did they get involved with Cecilia?
In the beginning, I mean, the revenge murders were all centered around Ria. It will be people that, you know, that she knows or loves. Later on, it would have become people that Cecilia and her gang thought might be banks or people with money. So, and I call them banks because Cecilia always had to have a source of income because she never worked a day in her life. So when they realized, okay, murder is actually fun and it's not that difficult for us, we're getting away with it, police are not capturing us, let's start commit more murders, but now for the sake of money. So then they would actually choose people that they would know will meet you in a certain place. I mean, a financial broker or a real estate agent, a realtor. These are people that are flexible, that can move around. And it was always a very specific MO, modus operandi, that they would follow. They will say, okay, let me meet you at a Spur. I know that was a meeting place, a Spur at a certain shopping mall. And that will be the address that will be documented at the office of that particular person. But while that person is on her or his way, then they will call and say, oh, I have a problem, I have car trouble or whatever, and they will make that person divert to their apartment block. So it will always be a professional person, maybe someone they knew, or maybe in an advertisement they saw in the newspaper. I know the real estate agent was someone they just saw in the newspaper. There's an ad that's called that person. It could have been anybody that actually practices that profession.
There were 11 murders in total over a period of 4 years. Do you know how they managed to get away with this for so long?
Yeah, that's almost another book. But the first 4 murders, that revenge murders, were investigated by certain officers. And there are many allegations of police corruption, police, benefiting from the murders, or actually protecting Cecilia and her gang in the beginning. So that is still on investigation. I'm not even allowed to reveal the names of that officers, even the names in the books. I mean, they are marked as X and Y. I can't reveal them at this stage. They are still being investigated. But I think that's why it was so easy. That's one thing. The investigative officer in the end, the one that actually solved all the murders, he asked one of the murderers one day, would you have stopped if we didn't catch you in this year, which was 2016? And he said, no, we would have just continued. It's just too easy. We got away with murder, so why stop if you didn't catch us?
And it was so interesting to read that Cecilia had a collection of knives and she carried a knife from the age of 14. What else was bizarre about this woman?
Oh my word. She had an imagination like you won't believe. So she told them, well, she was involved in Satanism because she was now a recovery, remember, or a converted Christian. She was a 42nd generational witch. She told them she was the most powerful witch to ever walk the face of the earth, and she called herself the bride of Satan. I've actually seen the typed out ceremony, the notes of a ceremony where they were actually married. She could astral travel, she could read people's minds, and she had several other supernatural powers that she would brag about. And she had multiple personalities. She told them she could change to a little girl, to people with, degrees, many degrees. She called herself a doctor and a psychologist, and she switched between the personalities. That was one of the ways she manipulated the friends. So yeah, I think that is the most. There are many, but I think that are the biggest controversies for me.
Can you also briefly share with our viewers what else she did at length to get away with whatever that she wanted at the time?
I think the interesting thing about this whole story, there were always two parallel storylines. It will always be the Cecilia's own story, her own motive, and it will always be the story with the little religious source over it that she will tell her friends to get them to do what she wants them to do. For example, she wants someone close to at Ria, that leader of the ministry, to be killed. For her, it will be to get back at Ria. She's mad at Ria, she feels rejected. But to a friend, she will say, Ria's not really doing what God wants her to do anymore. And she got direct order from God to help Ria to get back on the right path. So they have to remove all the people around her. So it's always two different stories. And the group will always think it is the religious story. Well, in the beginning, I'm not going to say that they didn't know at the end. Definitely not. They are not the victims here. They are cold-blooded murderers.
And lastly, Jana, if I may ask, she, together with the co-accused, now they were sentenced to multiple life sentences. How has this now affected the families of the victims, and have you made contact with them?
I think my conversations with the families will always be, thank goodness for the court case and the judgment and the conviction, but that will never bring back our family members. The victims in this case are so widely spread. As I've said, victims in this case is not only the deceased, but also the families of the deceased and also the families of the murderers. So I think they see it as a next step, and that's what they tell me. It's a next step, but nothing will ever bring closure. I do have a lot of contact with them. I've seen them about 2 weeks ago. People are struggling. I mean, you can imagine where a husband died, that's the main breadwinner, where two parents died, a family fell apart. There are people that's still struggling in and out of hospital, struggling with depression and all that. It's a disaster. It's like a war zone. Cecilia and her gang left a war zone.
That was Jana Marx in conversation with Polity about her book titled The Krugersdorp Cult Killings Inside Cecilia Steyn's Reign of Terror.